Okay, hello there. I'm Roag and this is gonna be my first ever Path of Exile build guide, so please don't hesitate to tell me how shitty it is in the comment section down below. Quick shout out first of all to this guy who definitely inspired me this build. Both builds are definitely very similar, but their main difference alone makes it worth to speak about both of them separately in my opinion. The character I'm gonna show you today is a Power Siphon Ascendant that makes use of mana stacking for both attack and defense purposes, and I'm gonna show you how. With first the offense. Damage scaling in PoE comes from basically two sources, right? Flat damage and increases to this flat damage. You usually scale a bit of both of these sources through multiple items, passives, nodes, and etc. Except in this build, both of these scaling methods only come from two items, without which our damage becomes basically non-existent. And these two items are Manastorm and Indigon. Together they form my build, the appropriately named Managon. Indigon is a helmet that makes it so the more mana we spend, the more mana we spend. And the more mana we spend, the more it increases our spell damage. But wait, Power Siphon is an attack, right? What's up with all of that spell damage? Well, in our passive tree, over here, we happen to allocate this very node that makes it so increases and reductions to spell damage also apply to attack damage, while wielding a wand, which we coincidentally do. So when I attack like this, my mana cost will gradually increase to be higher and higher, and it'll give me like a bunch of percent increased spell damage, which translates to attack damage. And the more we attack, the more this value gets high and the more our damage ramps up. So that was for the percent based portion of our damage, and now the flats. Manastorm is a shield dropped by the Conquerors that whenever we cast a spell, it removes our entire mana in exchange for flatlining damage. And this flatlining damage applies to everything. Spells, attacks, heralds, you name it. So when we cast a spell, here I'm gonna cast Blood Rage for instance, it removes all our mana and gives us a bunch of flatlining damage, which then gets killed by Indigon. Quick side note about Arcane Cloak, which we use and scale in this build. When you use it, like before everything, it'll spend the 64% of current mana to give you the Arcane Cloak buff, and then spend the remainder of your mana to give you the Manastorm buff. And this can be a bit bad. This can feel a bit bad because then you'll only spend 36% of your current mana for the Manastorm buff, which will only be like a tiny bit of what it could be if it would have spent your entire mana pool. So what you want to do to have optimal damage, which you barely need to at all, even in big boss fights, because we have huge overkill damage anyway. But yeah, if you really want to optimize it, you kind of want to cast Arcane Cloak, then regen all of your mana, and replace the weaker Manastorm buff by a bigger one by using another spell like Blood Rage, just like this. So you get both benefits of maximum Arcane Cloak buff and maximum Manastorm buff. So all that makes it so to scale our damage, we basically only need to get more mana and more mana regen to be able to reliably sustain the huge mana costs we're gonna have to face. The entire remainder of our damage scaling is done through just a few nodes in the passive tree, point blank, and 3 base power charges. And all of this adds up to a grand total of between 0 and 50 million DPS, only depending on how much mana you spend in the past 4 seconds. And if you're not so sure how to feel about this fact, I'll just let this small clip make you decide. Okay, so that was it for the offense part of the build. Let's now take a look at how we survive. But before, I'm gonna tell you a bit of a secret. I mechanically suck at the game, and at video games in general. I can dodge, I can see what's happening in front of me, I can press the right buttons at the right time. So over all these years of playing, I've developed advanced strategies to get around this problem, like playing Bristleback, or in our case, fitting the most defensive layers possible into my build. And back when I was playing around this character's PoE with 3.5k HP pool, I really thought this build wouldn't be me proof. Except it actually turned out to be, because these mere 3.5 HP are only the visible part of the mana iceberg. As a matter of fact, Mind Over Matter and Cloak of Defiance already cut off 40% of incoming damage. The remaining 60% have to go through Fortify, which we get from panic chill charging around, Arcane Cloak, which we get from holding down our left click while moving around, Agnostic, plus the Indigon life recovery from Mana Flasks, which makes us regen any hit over less than a second basically, Wind Dancer over here, and my last addition to the build, Veterans Awareness, which was inspired to me by Captain Lance's latest video. Shout out to him. Not that I still have to test how this little buddy performs, as I barely had the chance to play the game since I added it into it. And all of what I just said, it's only if we get hit at all, because thanks to Omayakan, Acro, and Phase Acro, and the Quartz Flask, we are basically dodge capped. All that jazz allows us to act like complete dummies in just about any boss fights, except that in my case there is no need for any acting. But let's talk about the gear. We need a high crit, high attack speed wand, so preferably an imbued wand, which is the best base. Every other mod on it is basically just a bonus except for the trigger mod, which is mandatory on this build. Because trust me, even if our mana regen is very high, we don't want to be removing all of our mana 5 times before each boss fight. Yeah. I already talked about these two bad boys. Just don't worry too much about the enchant over here. Since Power Siphon already has so many native projectiles, 2 more aren't a big deal even when we use barrage support for single target setup. Azir's Foible is just a no-brainer here, since it gives so much mana and mana regen, in addition to reducing our needs for attributes, which is kind of underrated in my opinion. Omayakan is our best installed boots, giving us perma onslaught and 20 attack and spell dodge, in addition to a good amount of mana and move speed. The 7% mana degen downside is easily mitigated by our big investment into mana regen. For glove slot, you absolutely want this Nexus glove base. It is a real game changer for Indigon builds, as it refunds all the mana you spend as often as 30% of the time. For the record, we often spend more than 2000 mana at once to attack when Indigon is all charged up. The rest of our gears, aka rings and belts, are dedicated to fitting the most mana resists, mana regen and life possible. And don't forget your mana recovery rate mod on your Shaper or Redeemer belt. It basically stacks multiplicatively with all the sources of mana regen, so it's pretty good. About our flasks, which are very important since we are an Ascendant Pathfinder. Yep. We want your classic boy, the Quicksilver of Adrenaline, a Bold Faith if you can afford it, and if you can, it's okay. You'll only lose like 3 mil DPS compared to a balanced Wise Oak anyway, so then you want your regular Diamond Flask, a Quartz Flask to stack up more dodge, and obviously an Enduring Eternal Mana Flask, which will recover both our life through Indigon and our mana. Just a quick side note about this jewel, which basically makes us able to regen rage whenever we want to, so before every boss fight, so we are able to swap it back and use Berserk, which is increasing our damage by an ungodly amount. So that's it for the gear. Let's talk briefly about our links over here. So we got Summonized Golem, Wave of Conviction, and Sniper's Mark into our trigger wand, which they'll be up like most of the time for boss fights, and that's the point. And then we got our Arcane Cloak setup over here with Arcane Surge, even though the more spell damage doesn't affect our attack damage. So it's only increases and reductions, not more multipliers that when Slinger affects. But we still want the Arcane Surge support for the 1% of mana regen per second. Then you want Berserk, Sigil of Power for bosses. This is the only other spell I cast when I want to attack a boss. Flame Dash to cover gaps. The Chill Charge 45 setup. Divergent Blood Rage because we want elemental attack damage glitch as life somewhere. We can also get it from alternate quality damage on full life. Then in the next 4 link we want Clarity and Precision. Precision is very important for accuracy, which we really need, and Clarity is just here to activate the second mod from My Watcher's Eye. Then you want like some slot, you can keep it over here, it doesn't make any difference, but you want some place to put your barrage support or peace support depending on what you're fighting at the moment, boss or trash mobs. Then you want your portal gem, and yeah, for the Power Siphon setup, of course, we're using Elemental Focus, which can be replaced by Awakened Elemental Focus, but I was too poor and lazy to change it. Divergent Elemental Damage with attacks, which makes you able to leech mana through elemental damage with attacks, of course. Damage on full life, we are always on full life because of this, and everything, and basically not getting hit. Then you want either Pierce or Barrage, depending if you want to fight a boss, Barrage, or Pierce, clearing trash. And then Awaken Lightning Pen support. And now the passive tree, we want to aim for mana the most, since it's the thing that scales both damage and defense in our build. And the rest is just like bonus HP, some damage, scaling through critical, strike chance and multiplier. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The passive tree is split into 2 thanks to the Ascendancy, which is composed of the Pathfinder sub-Ascendancy, primarily for the flask gain in boss fights, and Berserker, which is very important since it gives us a bunch of more damage, the ability to gain Rage, which then we consume by using Berserk to gain even more damage, and also very important, the cannot be stunned while you have at least 25 Rage thing, which is very important since we only have 3.6k HP. If we didn't have this, we would get stunned every time we would get hit, which would arguably not be very often, but still would be fucking annoying. Okay, so now I'm just gonna show you how the build performs in a map. This is some regular tier 16 Alert Guardian. I didn't have any Shaper Guardian map to showcase, and I'm pretty lazy to buy a map right now because it's kind of tedious. So yeah, the build's been feeling really great. The only thing that could have made it feel better, even better, would have been like an explosion synthesized wand, but these are like 100x, so I'm kind of lazy to farm this much currency, and I also don't really have much time for my level of efficiency, which is kind of low. This build is really great as clearing legions over here with like Power Siphon. This map layout kind of sucks, you. I can't really show you the true full potential here, but yeah, you get the point. It's Power Siphon and we got a lot of damage. The boss is here, we're gonna come back a bit later. I still have like 2-3 things to go over. I barely die with this build. I hope I'm not gonna die in the next 5 seconds as an reminder that overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer. But yeah, I rarely die, and I've been reaching level 94 pretty easily so far. The boss damage, as you'll be able to see, is kinda great. It's hard to give a precise number because it goes up and down so fast, because it only depends on how much mana you've been spending, and also the rolls on your lightning damage, which vary a lot. But like overall, the damage feels really great. Yeah, you just have to learn to keep using your spells regularly to be spending a lot of mana, and keep the Indigon buff up as well as the Manastorm buff. For clearing, Pierce is like very good. I've been using Chain before this, but the damage on like big monsters, like some random shit, I didn't want to activate this, but yeah. Yeah, with Pierce supports, the damage wasn't feeling too great somehow on small bosses, like beyond bosses, like things you don't want to have a gem swap to fight them. It was feeling like a bit meh, so I swapped it to Pierce support, which still gives like 20 more projectile damage, and it like started to feel really great. And even with our Pierce setup, we're at like I actually don't know how much CBS, but well over what we need to kill big monsters reliably. Okay, I guess this trash map layout is done, so we're gonna go to the boss. So far this has been like my best build ever. I cannot play only weird ass wonky build, so it is what it is. But yeah, this build is good. You barely die, and you deal a fuck ton of damage, and it's really fast. So yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking, I guess, for the boss fight, because I can't do two things at once very well. So we're just like swapping garage. I'll be using the small trick to gain rage right now and to be able to instantly start the fight with Berserk. The damage is gonna start off kind of low, and it's gonna ramp up like a lot, even though we kind of one shot his face anyway. But yeah, you saw the Shaper clip earlier. Damage is really great most of the time. It's only like sometimes that you'll be like, this could be higher, but it will still be several millions anyway. It's just like the difference between like 5 million DPS at the very lowest and like 50 million when everything is up at the same time. Oh, and yeah, we have Killing Strike natively from the Power Siphon. This feels great. The power charges also are generated through these two nodes. I don't know if I've covered this in the passive 3 section, but yeah, we can power charge through these even in boss fights, because we have so many uses of our Enduring Mana Flask. Okay, so yeah, this was my first Path of Exile build guide. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in 6 years, I guess, when I'll make another build as great as this one.